Hi, everyone. Welcome to Going D1 Real Recruiting Stories. Today is episode 4. We're excited to bring to you Josannah Vazquez and her story about USC volleyball and volleyball in general. And thank you for joining us. I have Gunnar Grun with me. I'm Joel Grun, and I will let Gunnar take it away.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So this is my lovely girlfriend, Josannah Vazquez. She grew up in the Dallas area in Texas, and then from there in high school, she went to Long Beach City College, where she played beach volleyball and indoor volleyball. She then made it to the University of Southern California for beach volleyball, and then she did her 5th year at East Tennessee State University playing indoor volleyball. So welcome, Josannah.
Excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Tough commute.
Yeah. Real hard.
Yeah.
So, I think volleyball is way outside of my comfort zone in terms of the process and D1 scholarships, D1 opportunities, both in beach and indoor. You're a unique person in terms of having experienced both, where most girls are probably focused on the indoor game, at least in the younger ages. And so I'd be curious to kind of hear a little bit about your journey from Dallas and indoor to USC beach, and kind of that whole process from a just kind of the high school level in particular at first, and then we can kind of dig into the JUCO, because that's also kind of interesting
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah. So, all of this for recruiting. 10 years ago? I don't like saying that. But even back then, beach volleyball in particular was growing exponentially, and I couldn't even imagine what it's like now. I could have an idea, but it's changed even so much since I've been in college and all of that stuff. But
Is it predominantly California and Florida, or where are most beach players?
Texas is
Texas too,
Texas is huge. When I was starting out, California, Florida, those were the two very typical ones. Texas was on the rise. And it's now one of the main places where people recruit. Like, it's gotten that competitive, and there's been so many clubs that have popped up and stuff like that. I started playing like indoor volleyball in general when I was like 9.
Right.
And then I was doing YMCA stuff. And I'm like, yeah, this is fine. And a lot of this will also tie into baseball and all of that fun stuff. So started playing when I was 9, just YMCA, nothing crazy. Right around when I was 12, one of my best friends who got me started playing volleyball, her dad was my YMCA coach, all that stuff. She was going to a club tryout, and that was 2010, and that was when the Rangers went to the World Series. And so my parents were out of town, and I was staying with these friends while my parents were out of town, and they're like, hey, like, can she go to this practice? I had no idea what I was going to, for one. I thought it was just a volleyball practice something. Turns out it was a tryout. And so I showed up to this tryout as a 12-year-old, and the coach was like, hey, I want her on the team. And me, I'm like, I don't know. I just went to play volleyball, and then that was the end of it. Like, I was hanging out with friends, made some new ones. That was it.
Right.
Come home, parents come home. The Rangers lose in the World Series, but we get obviously the ALCS bonus.
Right.
So my parents were kind of like, after they kind of were like kind of talking with our family, with our friends a little bit about it. They were like, hey, Jose, like, if you want to do this, you can. And if you don't like it, like, we have the money for it. It's not like this is going to be hard on us. It's not a problem. Yeah. We've got extra money kind of sitting here if you really want to. It's like, no, it's fine. Right. Like, YMCA is good. And they're like, are you sure? Like, if you really want to be competitive in this, like, this might be a good idea. And so they kind of convinced me to play a little bit. I was very wishy-washy about it.
Right.
And then
Right.
the moment I started playing, like there was no going back. I knew.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like I always knew I was gonna play something in college. Before it was volleyball, I wanted to do like equestrian. I was big into horses, and I wanted to be on the rodeo.
You are big into horses.
I am
She's
big
a
into
horse
horses.
girl.
I was a horse girl, but not like
you are a horse girl.
okay, I am a horse girl. But like then I was still riding pretty regularly. Like I wanted to be doing all that for the horses. I played soccer. That one I wasn't a fan of. I did not want to play soccer in college. That one I knew. But the moment I started playing competitive volleyball, I was like, I'm playing this in college, like somehow, some way. And even my first club game, I got hit in the face, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Like, so
Was that? Do you feel like that was? Do you feel like you felt that way because that was like your first sort of experience in like being in a really competitive atmosphere where you were trying to accomplish something?
oh no, I played club soccer also, like select
before
soccer.
that?
Yeah, like
Oh,
I was
before
on
that, okay.
at the same time.
Right.
I was on a club soccer team and I was doing the club volleyball, and I switched club soccer teams to a less competitive one because I was kind of like about it.
Mhm.
But I was on a much competitive team before that, and I was like, I don't want to go down this route.
Got it.
Right.
I had friends that were practicing every other day, and it was just insane. And I was like, no, I'm 10.
Mhm.
We don't need to do that.
So soccer was too much.
Yeah, I don't like running. Is basically the gist of it. And yeah, so that one I walked away from pretty quickly. But I played for a while. It got to the point where I was kind of showing up to the games. I wasn't going to practices, and I was like, okay, I can't do both.
Yeah.
But yeah, the moment I stepped on the court for volleyball, it was like, done deal. We're doing this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have something to add?
I was gonna start in the beach.
Well, I was gonna ask about like how about like kind of your freshman year of high school and like kind of what that looks like in terms of volleyball and sort of going from you telling us about when you were 12 and then where were you in terms of your volleyball career as a freshman in high school?
Okay. Yeah, so by that point I started playing beach. For my freshman year, my high school was pretty new.
Right.
It was the second year it was open, was my freshman year. The year before
The actual high school or the
actual high
teams?
school. No, the
Oh,
actual high
okay.
school.
Okay.
Opened my 8th grade year.
Okay.
The first year, like surprisingly, we had a good volleyball team. Like they went third round deep into playoffs, like whole 9 yards, and playoffs is like 5 rounds in Texas. So they went pretty far. And they lost their star outside, which was my position at the time. And there wasn't really anybody else to replace her. I mean, they had older girls that were technically outsides, but I was better, and so I made varsity my freshman year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was me and one of my best friends. We were the 2 freshmen on varsity. We had we made it to third round playoffs again. Pretty decent team. I started 6 rotation outside, which means I never left the court unless for whatever reason I kind of sucked that day.
Right.
But yeah, pretty big shoes to fill for freshmen. But for high school, that wasn't really where you get recruited.
Okay.
And it's not where, well, at the time, obviously recruiting rules have changed in the last 5 or 6 years. At the time, you could commit for college your freshman, sophomore year verbally,
Right.
And so I was getting letters and stuff, but nothing serious. And I didn't start getting them until club, which is in the spring.
So were you playing, did you play club volleyball in every spring of your high school career?
I started playing club when I was 12.
Right.
Or, yeah, 12, up until I was 17.
Got it.
So every single spring.
And so how did beach fit into that? Because beach is a spring sport, but
it's spring in college. It's summer.
It's summer in high school.
In general.
Okay.
Yeah, for
so
juniors.
it didn't interfere with your club schedule.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
So I started playing club at this tiny little club in my hometown. I moved
Right.
clubs my 14th year to a much more competitive club. The year after that, the year my sister was also going to start playing club. She decided she wanted to be like her big sister, play club volleyball, whole 9 yards. Obviously, because of baseball, dad's not home 8 months out of the year, and club season starts in January. Dad leaves in February, and my mom's basically a single mother for that amount of time.
Right,
So
right.
with Helena and me playing club, she wouldn't have been able to get me all the way to the new club that I'd started at, and it was like 45 minutes away.
Okay.
And there's just a lot of travel with that one compared to where Helena was going to be. And so that original plan was I was going to go back to my original club, play up a year to be in the more competitive team because they actually went to nationals for that age group.
Right.
And then Helena would also play at that club because it was literally 5 minutes from our house.
Right.
Right before tryouts, we had a family friend that went to another high school, but I used to play soccer with the daughter. They're outside on their club team, switch clubs, and they needed somebody. And so they're like, hey, we know y'all's situation. We know you can't get Josannah up here because it was the exact same distance from my other club.
Right.
And they live in our hometown. So they were like, we will get her to every practice, every tournament, all of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mom didn't have to take me to practice because I hadn't started
Oh, wow.
driving yet. It was my 15th year, so my freshman year of high school.
Right.
Yeah, we were competitive. It was exponentially better than where I would have been even if I played up a year. Like the way you kind of measure it in club, at least at the time, was kind of you went to nationals in June, and so nationals because money. You don't just have one division for nationals. You had
Right.
four.
Okay.
Technically five, but the fifth one it doesn't count. So it was
Right.
open, national, USA, and then American was like the
Right.
lowest, or the lowest one of the ones you had to qualify for. And they would go to these big 3-day tournaments at different places around the country and all that stuff. The club that I would have, or the team that I would have played it for at the smaller club, the highest they ever got to qualify was American, and the team that I went to, we qualified in national in the second.
Okay.
The year before that, they won the national in that division, the nationals in the division that they were in.
And are there college coaches at those tournaments? Is that kind of your primary point of contact with the college programs?
Yeah, so club, at least in Texas, it depends on the region and stuff like that. For my club, we played 10 tournaments a year, from January to May. There's this one special tournament series called the Tour of Texas, and that's where you would get a lot of your local colleges, like state schools. Sometimes you get some Oklahomas, Arkansas, Louisianas, those schools.
Right.
But for the most part, Texas. So they had different stops. So there was one in Dallas, there was one in Houston, and then there was one in either San Antonio or Austin. So like there was 3 stops, but those were the 4 locations that they could be at any point for over the years.
And so when you say there were state schools at those, are you talking about like the big state schools like Texas A&M, Texas Tech, like all those?
Yeah, those Power Fives we'd get like Texas Southern, Texas.
So there were some smaller ones too.
Yeah, Baylor,
right,
SMU, like those types of schools. Lamar, Lamar's in Rice would be there. I've seen them a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my teammates, she went to Arkansas State. They saw her at the Tour of Texas one of the years. I think Clemson even came one year just because Texas is such.
So there's a really big range of schools.
For the most part, though, they kind of stuck to southern schools. You didn't see like a Stanford or a Minnesota.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I did one time. Doesn't matter. But like you'd get like good schools at these tournaments, specifically looking for Texas kids.
Mm-hmm.
And were there other high school teams from Iowa or Ohio?
No, so the Tour of Texas was only Texas teams. So that was one series of tournaments, and then you'd get the qualifiers, which were the national tournaments. And so those are the big 3-day tournaments that I was talking about to get you to the nationals at the very end of the year. And so we had a huge one in Dallas called the Lone Star. We'd always go to that one. We'd go to Chicago, Indianapolis, Kansas City. There's countless other ones. There's one that's in Vegas, Salt Lake, LA.
So typically, I guess, if you're not from Texas, you're trying to compete, you're trying to beat out other teams in your state or region to get to the national tournaments to get exposure, or
yes, I would say. I mean, it's all kind of money. So when you go to nationals with these club teams, it's not a part of your initial fee
Mhm.
that you paid for when you signed your contract. So it was an
Okay.
extra fee for the coaches and the practices and all that stuff. And then like on top of that, you have to pay for the like it was more money, which is why they pushed it for the clubs at least. And then it was a benefit for you once you get into high school that you actually get to be seen by college coaches. So
Right.
yeah, and the qualifiers, that's where you would see a lot of different schools from different places. So I remember this is my coach at ETSU. She is now at Michigan. She went to the Kansas City qualifier to go recruit for Michigan.
Okay.
In Minnesota would go to Indianapolis or Lone Star. I saw just all kinds of different these coaches would come to these qualifiers because it's 3 days and they'd have the open division, which is the top division, and that's where you see the top Power 5 players that are like going to dominate in the next couple of years.
Right.
I remember the Kentucky setter from when they won in 2020. They were the 2020 championship. She was player of the year, and I used to play against her in Kansas City qualifier, like
Okay.
that sort of a thing. So, and then you'd
So-
have regional tournaments throughout that, and we're kind of, but that was kind of how like the season was brought around. And then beach would be, I mean, if you could May to July, I would play like 2 tournaments a year. It was a whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
So let me ask you this: in indoor, did you feel that you needed to be on a good team to get exposure, or would they find you if you were good by yourself?
yes and no. At the time, in my 15-year-old brain, it also helped that I was on these teams. I wanted to be on the top team. So each club for their age group has different levels of teams, like different competitive levels. I was on this for the team that I ended up staying on, the club that I moved to eventually. I was on the top team every year.
Right.
It kind of ensured that we got the best tournaments, or like we pushed to go to the best tournaments. Some clubs it doesn't matter, but that's just kind of the way it was for me, and that's what
Right.
I wanted.
So did you, I guess then if that was the case for you, did you ever see like other people from maybe clubs that weren't as good as your club, but those individuals were excellent, get the right recognition if they went to, either nationals qualifiers or the Tour of Texas tournament or that kind of thing?
Yeah, it definitely helped. But it was a lot of times it was if your team wasn't that good, but you were fantastic, but you weren't going to the good tournaments, that was the issue.
Right.
So obviously you can get all the film you want, but most times coaches want to see you playing. They want to see you interacting with your parents after you play, interacting with the
Right.
coaches and stuff that you don't
Right.
see in a highlight reel. And so they enjoy seeing like you physically in person. So if you're not going to the qualifiers in the open division, they're like, oh, she's only playing in American. Like, Minnesota's not going to be going to look at a girl who's playing in the American division bronze bracket, regardless of how
Right.
good she is. Like, that's just a waste of their time because if you're on a better,
So you would say that basically that the team you're on has an impact, and you need to be on a team that's competitive to get your exposure level high enough
To be
for
in the right tournament.
D1 schools.
I think for me, I was always I'm going Power 5. That was what I wanted.
Right.
That's what I was looking for. For my sister, per se, she went to a small D3 school. That wasn't necessarily the storyline that she went through, and that was a different story. It just kind of depends on the coaches that you're looking for, if that makes sense.
Right.
If I didn't care about where I went, if I just wanted to find a school that made me happy, then
Right.
that would have been a different story, and I could have gone to a different team. But
Right. So you're saying happiness and going Power 5 were not necessarily correlated.
I was just so competitive that I'm gonna be happy beating the crap out of everybody, and that was what I was going for.
Right.
Yeah, I was a different person in high school when it came to volleyball. It's a lot meaner. I was very like blinders on. Nothing else matters. I am going to a D1 school. Does not even D1, like Power 5.
Right. Right.
So
That was your
That was my thing.
focus.
Yeah, that I didn't care where it was. It had to be a Power 5 school with a big football team.
Okay.
That's what I had in my head.
Okay. Were you gonna say something, Gunnar?
I was going to ask if, so how did kind of moving along your high school career, I guess another question is how do you feel that like your actual high school team impacted your recruiting process? Did you feel like that made any difference whatsoever?
No, I could have quit high school if I wanted
Okay.
to. I really could have. A lot of my teammates at USC didn't even play high school ball.
Right.
It's mute and irrelevant. I mean, it was kind of fun. Emphasis on kind of, but in terms of getting to college, it didn't. It didn't.
So your high school team, I would suspect that's the case for a variety of sports at this point. But your high school team was complementary but not necessary.
Yeah.
Meaning if you did really well in high school on your high school team, maybe somebody would be paying attention, but it was much less important than the travel team.
Yeah, there was one time twice, a college coach came throughout my entire 4 years at
Right.
high school. And one was some tiny school that I honestly don't remember. And one of my teammates ended up actually going there.
Right.
Which is good for her, but don't remember the name of the school. And the other one was Kansas.
Right.
They came to watch the other girl that was my age, that was a freshman with me. They watched her. She ended up not going there, but they came,
Right.
but that was after I was already deciding I wanted to go beach, and I didn't really care about Kansas because
Right.
locked.
Okay. So did you to get us from this is kind of freshman sophomore year? What happened junior? I think sophomore summer or
Yeah.
sophomore travel and junior travel, because I think those are kind of crucial years for the recruiting process.
Yeah, at the time, that was when a lot of girls were committing to schools and stuff like that. My sophomore year, so it was told to me that I should have this account where I would post my film and I can email schools off of it.
Okay.
Recruit.com, I think. I don't know. I sent over 100 emails. I had, so at the time, beach volleyball was still a emerging sport. And so there was less than 50 schools that had it. And so you have 10 years to get 50 before it's NCAA sponsored. And there was a list, and I emailed every single school in that list every weekend for 10 tournaments.
For
Okay.
sophomore spring?
Yes.
Okay.
Sophomore spring.
So sophomore spring, you emailed every beach coach in the country.
Pretty much. Yep.
Every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, maybe that was said 50, but I sent over 120 emails that year. That spring.
That semester.
It got to the point where South Carolina told me to please stop emailing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they got back to me. They're like, we have a full recruiting class. We're good. And I was like, oh, okay. That was like March. I emailed them so much that by March they were like, please stop. Please stop.
Well, good for you. That at least you then know that
Yeah.
you've done everything you can,
Yeah, so that was that. But that sophomore summer was where it really kind of got heated with the beach versus the indoor sort of debate for me. My club team was going to nationals. I was going to go to nationals. My parents paid the money.
Right.
And we practiced Monday, Wednesday nights was what we practiced from December to May. June rolls around, school's out. They decide that they want to practice on Saturdays. Well, 3 months ago, I booked a beach tournament with a girl. I'm not going to be at practice. So I missed like 3 or 4 practices, and it got to the point where my coach was like, are you even committed? Like, do you want to go to nationals? Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I was like, yeah, you have my parents' money. Like, I'm going to nationals. We booked our flight. The hotels are there. Like, we're going. I've already emailed schools. They're coming to see me. Like, I had 3 or 4 schools going to nationals to specifically see me.
And were they Power 5 schools or?
No, I remember one was UAB, so Alabama Birmingham.
Yep.
One was Houston Baptist because God love them, they tried hard. They really wanted me to go there.
Okay.
And then one was, I think I emailed Georgia State. I can't remember if that was specifically Georgia State or not, but there's three. No, UNC Wilmington, I think, was that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So those are, I guess we would call them mid majors.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so D1, but not. And did they have beach programs, or this was purely indoor?
They all three had beach. At that point I wanted to play both. So that's why I was
Okay.
playing club. And then I'm talking to these schools, and I was having issues with my club coach. Indoor wasn't really like doing it for me personally. Like I was just kind of like, I really love beach more. And indoor is
Right.
just frustrating. Indoor is just there, but I don't know how else to get seen.
Yeah.
Because there are so few tournaments in my area. My parents couldn't send me, and they didn't even know. Most girls went to California for the whole summer and lived out in California and played tournaments every weekend. We didn't know that was a thing, so we didn't do
Right.
it. So I'm playing 2 tournaments a year, trying to get exposed and all this stuff. So when I was on these phone calls with these coaches, I was like, "Hey, what should I do? Should I stop playing indoor and just play beach?" They're like, "Whatever makes you happy." And I'm like, "That's not answering my question." And yeah, so that kind of became the issue there. And then junior we rolls around, I went on a couple visits. That was where I realized like mid majors really weren't for me, because I was like, I do not see myself going to these schools. Like I don't like it.
Right.
Like it's great for somebody else, but this is just not me. And one of our family friends through baseball is Misty May trainer, and she ended up being my junior college coach and Olympic gold medalist, whole 9 yards, wonderful human being. My dad was like, you know what? Let's ask Misty. Like, she's gonna shoot us straight. Like, she'll tell us what's up. And so we asked her, and she's like, you can always go back to beach, but you cannot go back to indoor. Like, it's so
interesting.
at the time, it's so competitive with indoor that it's so much harder that once you leave the indoor game to come back to it.
No.
And so she was like, continue to play, like, because we were debating on whether I wanted to play club my junior year.
Right.
And so I ended up playing club. I only did the regular season that year. Helped us get to nationals. We qualified for open, the top division, and then like, peace out. I'm gonna go live with Misty May trainer for a month. And that was my junior. That was like my junior, between junior and senior year. And that was when Misty was applying for the job for my junior college. So I she was applying for it. I went over her resume, for goodness. She's like, hey, can you look over this for me? I was like, I'm pretty sure they're just going to give you the job anyway, but it's fine. But yeah, so that's what got me there.
So you, your junior summer, you went to be with her, stay with her, and
that was in Long Beach, California.
Yeah, she was living in Long Beach at the time. Yeah, she lives somewhere else now, but yeah, she was living in Long Beach at the time, like right by Long Beach State.
So you did a lot of beach training that summer.
Yeah,
being on the beach, obviously.
Pretty much 3 days a week. I was conditioning 2 times another week, and then I was weightlifting about every other day.
Yeah.
So just full on beach training that summer. With
and did you have tournament exposure, or okay? So you were in tournaments as well while you were out there.
Yeah, so I played in 2. I was out there for a month, but then she was doing camps at the time, and so I traveled with her from Long Beach to Vail, Colorado. We did a grass clinic there, and then I played in a grass tournament with a girl that I met that morning, and we made it to semis. So that was kind of cool.
That's fun.
We were the Match.com partners, because they were just like, hey, these 2 girls need a partner, and then that was it. And then we also went to New Jersey and Rhode Island for 2 other camps. So I was traveling with her for that, and then I went home right around 4th of July. So I was out there from like end of May to like Labor Day weekend. No, not Labor Day. Memorial Day. I always get those mixed up. Memorial Day weekend to 4th of July was basically
okay. So you spent that time with her, going to tournaments, going to camps, and what was your sense of Power 5 exposure from those camps and tournaments with her?
I didn't get much again. Like, I was not. It was kind of the thing is like, I hadn't, like I said earlier, like all these girls that were committing to these Power 5 schools, they were going to California every year for 4 years before they committed. And I wasn't doing that. That was my first time doing it, and most roster spots were filled, basically.
Got it.
And so like I did go to this really, really big tournament at one point, and like I had a number on my calf, and there was coaches all around and all this stuff. But yeah, like I was with her, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't what I wanted, basically.
You weren't there as early as you.
I didn't get into
should
the
have been.
game early enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like I started playing at 13, but like in terms of actually getting seen, I didn't
Right.
get in. I didn't get
Okay. So you were underexposed. Let me see if I can understand this correctly. So, um, similar to maybe lacrosse, I would say you're telling me that by sophomore season, girls are starting to get volleyball offers for Power Five schools, and so when you're going your junior summer, uh, there's a limited number of spots for your year relative to what may have been available freshman or sophomore year.
Yes.
So there's a recruiting cycle that's pretty early in volleyball relative to, what at least I've seen in baseball, where, and Gunnar can corroborate, but baseball it seems like there's so much movement and it's constant that you end up having a much longer recruiting cycle.
I think it's also because guys grow later. So I've been this tall. I've been 5'10" since I was 14 years old. I stopped growing
Right.
in middle school, and most of my teammates stopped growing in middle school. So for these coaches, it's like, oh, she's tall. I can teach tall, or I can't teach tall. I can teach volleyball. Let's get the
Right.
tall girl and work with that. So
Right.
that was kind of, at least like being able for women's sports before the change in NCAA rules, and you can't really recruit until after their junior year starts.
Right.
That was the thing. It was like these girls they're done growing. Like this is physically what we're gonna get. We can get skills later. Kind
Right.
of.
So
Right.
did you feel like the recruiting process and like sort of the roster spots on colleges that you were talking to, did you feel like those cycles were happening at very different times between indoor and beach, or did you feel like they kind of happened at the same time with indoor and beach?
They happened at I would say the same time.
Okay.
It was just I was late for the Power Five
Right,
schools.
right.
So yeah.
Okay.
So essentially the Power Five recruiting is one time cycle, and then the mid-major recruiting is another cycle, and then Division 2, 3 is a totally different cycle.
Yeah.
So if I were to summarize that, you would essentially have a lot of competition to get as early as possible, as opposed to maybe some other sport where there's more time to. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe it's the same thing with all women's sports, is that they recruit earlier than men's. I don't know. You might know better than I. So you also went to ETSU. So at ETSU, were they recruiting? What age were they recruiting?
Well, by the time I got to ETSU, the NCAA rules had changed.
Right.
So when I was by the time I got to high school or college, they changed it, and you can't contact athletes or prospective student athletes until September 1st of their junior year. I could get contact for that. That was
So
cool change.
So what we're talking about is irrelevant, is what you're saying.
Kind of.
So we were talking about the evolution of recruiting and how when you were recruited, you could recruit a sophomore. Now the rules have changed, and juniors are being recruited. So explain what that means for someone going through the process right now.
I just had a compliance meeting about this. This is wonderful.
She's a great person to have on the podcast.
Okay, so there's all kinds of dates, but basically it's for a prospective student athlete, they are not allowed to be contacted by a college coach until September 1st of their junior year.
Okay.
Letters, texts, calls, emails, whole 9 yards. They can reach out, I think, beforehand, but the coaches can't reach out. Don't quote me on the first part though, but I'm pretty sure like not everybody knows the rules that kids
Right.
can start reaching out beforehand. But the coaches cannot respond, I don't think, until September 1st of their junior year. Maybe they could come to stuff, but they can't interact. Nobody
Okay.
nothing. But then you can't sign and commit and officially commit and sign your NLI. I get them obviously with NIL. There's all kinds of ins.
The NLI, yeah.
NLI, National Letter of Intent. You cannot sign that until the signing date is November 8th of your senior year. That is the earliest, and that's the early signing date.
Okay.
For sports like football, basketball, men's basketball specifically, or no, women's included in that. And I think baseball, there are signing periods that you can only sign in like windows. So for sports like volleyball, beach volleyball, a lot of the other women's sports, other men's sports, once November 8th hits, you can sign an NLI at any point prior to you getting there. It does not matter, but November 8th is the earliest. So there is no more verbal commitments or anything like that. It's like you commit and then that's it. You sign a paper that says, I think obviously you can decommit and stuff like that, but signing the NLI is what solidifies your commitment to the school that you're eventually going to go to. But that's the timeline now across the board for all sports. So it was much different because.
So, right. So, and then I guess going into your first year of college, what was the process like for getting from your high school in Texas to Long Beach City College with Misty May?
So thankfully, obviously, she was a friendly friend. She gets the job mid-July. And my parents are like, Josannah, you're not liking the schools that are talking to you. Why don't you just go to Misty? And Dad, with baseball, like junior college is a great option for baseball. For volleyball, I was honestly very embarrassed to go to junior college. I did not want to go to junior college. I was like, I'm going to go to a 4-year or like I'm going to go to some 4-year.
Right.
And my parents were like, Josannah, did you realize like once you go play for Misty, you can go anywhere. Like she has all of the connections. So again, convincing me, I finally texted Misty. I was like, hey, can I come play for you next year? And she was like, yeah, sure. And then that was kind of like the end of it for that, obviously.
Wow. And when did you text her that?
August
Of your senior year?
My senior year.
Got it.
Because I was like, I'm done recruiting. I'm done. I'm done for a year. I'm not doing it. I don't want to.
August before your senior year.
August before my senior year, and it worked out. I go through my senior year of high school volleyball. I knew I wasn't going to play club, but right before we started playoffs, I broke my ankle, required surgery, whole 9 yards. I didn't get to start playing again until February. So that was November, early November, surgery week before Thanksgiving. I got back in the sand like end of February was
okay.
Fine. Moved to graduated obviously, moved to California in July.
Okay.
And then season started for indoor September, like the first week of September.
Okay.
Played twice a week, whatever, whole 9 yards. Then I played at beach. So that started in February. And as I was playing beach, I was watching all of my teammates. So obviously junior college is just freshmen and sophomores. I was watching all of my sophomore teammates not have any plan for where they were going. Like they're like, whatever. And Missy's like, you want to go play somewhere? Go email people. Like do something. And I'm like, why aren't they? Whatever. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start emailing as soon as we start playing. So I started emailing, and at that point, I'd gotten some traction, and Misty started talking to people. I was only emailing Power 5 schools. Only Power 5. Rip the Pac-12. But I was only really emailing Pac-12 schools because I was still only had beach really at the Power 5 level that were good besides like Florida State. That was like the other at the time really really good school at a big school, and again with a big football team. Apparently that's all I wanted. But yeah, so I had started talking to Misty mentioned that UCLA wanted my film. I sent them something. I never really heard back from them. I emailed, but never heard back. They told me to go to camp. It was $250. So, maybe not. Pepperdine was talking to me a little bit. I never visited or anything because they couldn't really give me numbers in terms of scholarship. They're like, so how much money do you need? And I was like, all of it. You're $72,000 a year.
Yeah.
Help me out. And what sucks about beach is there's only 6 scholarships for
Really?
12 to 18 players.
So similar ratio to baseball.
Yeah, so there's at the most you're only going to get 50%, and that's if you're lucky.
Right.
I didn't really know that at the time, but they're like, so how much money do you need? And we're like, all of it. And they're like, okay, can you give us a better answer? And I'm like, you know what? We're going back and forth. Like, I need like percentage or something. I need like a concrete number kind of a thing. So we kind of just let that one slide. At that point, I was talking to both of the Arizonas, Arizona and Arizona State.
Right.
Misty mentioned me at a wedding to the Arizona coach. Don't know why,
Okay.
but she did. I went to a camp, and then I was going to a camp at Arizona. I decided, and I visited both Arizona schools in the weekend. My mom and I flew to Phoenix. We visited Arizona State, then we drove down to Tucson. I did the camp at U of A, and then I went back to California. My mom went back to Texas. That same weekend of all of this, I wanted to fly back a day early because I got an email back from USC saying, hey, come to a camp. I was like, I'll go to a camp at USC.
So you paid $250 for USC.
I paid $250 for USC. UCLA actually didn't email me back about a camp until like later in May. So I'd already decided to go to USC's camp, and my parents were like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. It's a little steep, whatever. But then after USC's camp, they're like, we can't keep doing this kind of a thing. So we had to scrap UCLA later. But yeah, so the day after that, I went to USC's camp, and then don't think anything of it. I thanked Anna, who was the coach at the time. They killed it, I thought. I mean, obviously. And then, well, because they liked me afterwards. Like, they called me afterwards. I was in a final. I had my phone off. I come out of the test. My mom had called me like 7 times. What the heck is going on? I called back. Yeah. Where have you been? I was like, Mom, I was taking a final. Like, calm down. She's like, they want you. USC called Misty. And I'm like, she's like, have you talked to Misty? I was like, no, I haven't. I was in a final, Mom. Like, calm down. What is going on? She's like, talk to Misty. I was like, okay, I'll talk to Misty. I go home, I talk to Misty, and she's like, yeah, Anna really liked you, blah, blah, blah. She wants you for sophomore year. And I told U of A, I also told Utah this, and I told Stanford, I didn't want to go my sophomore year. I wanted to go my junior year. I wanted to stay one more year at Long Beach before I really committed anywhere. I was doing all of the recruiting stuff early. And then US said, hey, we want you your sophomore year. I was like, okay.
So that was the school you really wanted, basically.
At the time, well, yes, obviously. At the time, it was my dream school. Like, my dream, never in a million years thought that I would ever go to USC, because in high school and when beach volleyball was like an emerging sport, I was only watching USC. It was the only school that had beach volleyball on TV. So I'd be in class and be like, hey, Josannah, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm watching beach volleyball. Who are you watching? USC. Like, that was constantly the answer. I watched them for years. And so it was like, I watched them winning national title after national title after national title. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that would be so cool. I'd never really been to USC either. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, like, I will start this process. I will go on all the stuff. And yes, we scheduled the visit. And at the same time, I was also talking to Cal pretty heavily. After the U of A visit, that kind of fell off. I liked Arizona State, but there wasn't much communication there. But yeah, so I was talking to Cal pretty heavily. They saw me at like the junior college state championships or whatever. It was in Northern California. And I'd scheduled a visit with them for the end of June. I finally convinced Anna to do a visit earlier in June because my dad was in town and he wanted to go to that. And the Rangers had an off day in LA and all this stuff. And so we were like, Anna, like, my dad's going to be in town like this. Like, the schedule's just, my dad wants to be there. She was trying to get all of this stuff. She basically wanted to hand me like, hey, if you come here, this is what's going to happen, kind of a thing. Like, I was going to have to walk on, but she's like, I've got your financial aid. I've got your room, your like living situation. Like, she wanted everything laid out and done before I did, basically. And we were like, no, we don't need that yet. Like, we just want to see the school. I've never even seen the school. And so we visited June 13th. My visit with Cal was on like the 29th. did the visit. My dad and I looked at each other, we were like, yeah, this is it. Like, this
This will
is,
be great.
we were both just in awe. I love the school. I love the atmosphere. I mean, volleyball was obviously how I got there, but like I stayed for the school. And that was kind of one of those things like my dad and I talked about. I was always looking at these schools like, okay, if volleyball got taken away, would I want to stay at the school?
Right.
And the only time I ever answered that question, yes, wholeheartedly, was USC.
Interesting.
And Misty was even like, hey, like, I know it's expensive and I know she has to walk on, but like, if you guys can make it work volleyball wise and like in school wise career, whatever like, she will be set, kind of a thing was
Right.
what really pushed. And so we were like, okay. And so the next day I called Anna and I was like, I'm in. I would love and be honored to go to your school and be part of your team, all this stuff. And then she's like, wonderful. Okay, here's the application, sends all these stuff. And I was like, but hey, I do have all of this. And I was really transparent with her about the whole Cal situation. And I was like, I don't want to burn bridges and all of this stuff. And obviously I haven't gotten accepted yet because at the time they were like, yes, you have good grades, but it's also really hard to get into USC. And she didn't lie to me about, she's like, oh yeah, she wasn't like, oh yeah, you're gonna get in. She was kind of like, in case you don't, I don't think you won't, but in case, do not cancel that visit with Cal, basically.
Right.
So I acted like I hadn't committed to USC yet. I got accepted the day before I left for the Cal visit. And then went on the Cal visit like I was still available. And it was funny because I walked around Cal, and Cal's is pretty, but I just kind of that feeling of like, this isn't me. This isn't where I'm supposed to end up. This isn't right. And so it's kind of fun that like I got to make the decision and then get that like confirmed afterwards.
Right.
And so yeah, so I committed mid-June. I went home for the rest of the summer instead of staying in Long Beach because of obviously I didn't need to be in Long Beach for indoor practices and stuff.
Right.
Moved back in August. Yeah, mid-August. Started schools end of August and started at USC. And
that was it. That's awesome.
That was it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So I had a couple questions about well, first, did USC do you feel like the school was what you wanted, and do you feel like the school was worth the I guess the worth it in terms of, hey, I'm all in, and do you feel like that was a positive experience for you?
I would say, well, the school itself, yes. Obviously, volleyball is a whole other ball game and a whole other can of worms. But I don't think that I would have changed it. I mean, looking back now, like I ended up getting my master's in a completely different subject, but I am in the position in the job that I have in the industry that I'm in now because of USC.
Okay.
I wouldn't have wanted to be an academic advisor or work in athletics again had it not been for USC, specifically my time there.
Okay. And I know volleyball was somewhat of a frustrating experience, which actually the more people I talk to, the more they're frustrated by their college sports.
Yeah.
You know, do you feel like your expectations, because everyone expects to be at least an important part of the team, but do you feel like once you got there, you're like, all right, well, I'm enjoying it, because you had Olympians on your team, and there was a very high level. Did you enjoy it, or was it something that was more of a frustration for you?
I think it was both. I enjoyed my time there. It was frustrating for me because I had such a learning curve. My first full season of beach volleyball was my freshman year of college. Like
Right.
I had played 1 or 2 tournaments a year prior to that. I mean, I kind of practiced really, but like I didn't know anything. I really didn't.
Right.
I got there on pure athleticism and I could jump and hit the ball. But like in terms of strategy and all of the other things that come with beach volleyball that are different from indoor, I knew nothing. And there was such a big learning curve for me that I was never a big part, especially that first year. And then we got a new coach, and I wasn't the new coach's recruit, so he didn't care if I succeeded or failed. I was just there.
Yeah.
And so I was very much on the sidelines, metaphorically and literally, and forgotten a lot of times. Like I legit got forgotten at a not forgotten, like he left me there, but like there was a preseason tournament. He was supposed to make sure everybody played at some point. He forgot to play.
Right.
And he had to call and apologize for this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, so like, what am I doing wrong that you're not noticing me?
Right.
And that's not what's happening. I go, yeah, it is. Like you literally forgot I existed for a day. Like,
right.
Yeah. So it was just different in that respect. So I think I got better. And I mean, when you're surrounded by Olympians and coached by, I've counted a couple times in my volleyball career, I've been coached by 7 Olympians.
Wow.
Just
that's amazing.
Coached or played with 7 Olympians. And I'm pretty sure it's about to be 9 pretty soon.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I was just surrounded by such a high level that like you can't help but get better. And I figured it out and all of this stuff. So, but in terms of just like, all right, I was getting better, but then everybody else was also getting better and they were already ahead of me. So it's one of those things when you look back, you're like, I wasn't really meant to succeed, if that makes sense. I think if my coach my sophomore year had stayed, it might have been a little bit different. But definitely once the coaching changes, looking back now, like there's nothing I could have done. And I tried. It is what it is. And I moved on.
So then I guess, you know, after you finish out your undergrad at USC, you decide that you want to go and get your master's in sports administration at East Tennessee State, and you decided to play indoor there. They didn't have a beach program, right? Yeah.
My original plan was I wanted to play both. And I figured, all right, I don't really care where the school is. I'm not going for the school itself. I'm just going for the volleyball this time. So I didn't care about mid-major, Power 5 or anything like that. And at the time, because I was struggling so much with the Power 5, the whole thing, I was like, you know what? Maybe let's not do Power 5. Let's go somewhere smaller where I just have fun, where it's not as competitive. You know, national championships aren't on the line. It's different.
Olympic tryouts aren't
a factor in rosters at all. So that was kind of, so I was talking to, and it was also COVID too, was also in the midst of all of that. And I knew that I wanted to stay in California, in all honesty. Obviously at that point I met Gunnar. I didn't really want to leave. I'd made friends. I had a life for 4 years in California. I didn't want to leave. But California was so strict with COVID, everybody was staying. Nobody left and decided, I'm done. But teams at East and stuff like that, they were getting seasons when COVID was happening. And so their girls were deciding, all right, I played my 4 years, I've finished my degree, I'm good. Like I have that closure where a lot of the girls didn't, so they stayed. And so there was no roster spots really. I talked to San Jose State, but obviously that's Northern California. Their head beach coach was one of my club coaches in Texas, actually.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of, as soon as he saw my name in the transfer portal, because the transfer portal was a thing at that point. And I can go into that also, rules, NCAA compliance. Thing.
We'll have to do another compliance
I can do a compliance
podcast
for you. Yeah, but
So how did you end up deciding on East Tennessee State? Because I know obviously a lot of your family's in Knoxville. I know that played a part in it.
So at the time, I had just gotten told by Tennessee that they couldn't take me as a walk-on. They just had too many girls on their roster. Again, because my family's in Knoxville, I wanted to be in Knoxville. My grandparents were there. I was like, oh, just live with Barb and Don. It's fine. But they didn't have any room. So I was kind of annoyed by that. And then my dad, at the time, I hadn't decided that I wanted to switch majors. I was still wanting to do strength and conditioning, which is what my undergrad basically was in. And East Tennessee State has a really, really good strength and conditioning program for masters and doctorates and all of those things. Like the head of Olympic weightlift, or like the headquarters of Olympic weightlifting for whatever reason, is in Johnson City. Like the two, like the biggest like researchers or whatever, like way back when, worked at ETSU and we're from ETSU.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, my dad's gone to like conferences in Johnson City, like whole 9 yards. I never heard of ETSU before I went there.
Huh.
Like, yeah,
That's crazy.
I didn't know about Johnson City except for the Darius Rucker song. Like, well, I guess it's not technically his song, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, so after that,
So
Dad told me about the school and about the program, and he's like, "Hey, just email the coach. They don't have beach, but does it really matter?" And I was like, "You know what? You're right." Because at that point, Tennessee didn't have a beach team either, so I was like,
Yeah.
I'll email her." And I was going home. It was middle of season. It was February. My best friend's mom had just died, and I was going home for that. And that was also in the middle of the big freeze that happened in Texas. But there's a lot going on. I was going through security, and I get a phone call that I didn't see. And then as I was getting through security, I get a text message. "Hey, this is Benavia Jenkins. I'm the head coach at ETSU. I just tried to call you. Please call me back when you get a chance." And so I had to, I was like, "Hey, I'm heading home in the middle of COVID for a family emergency. Can I call you back when I get to Los Angeles?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, absolutely. Hope everything's okay."
Right.
The end of that. I go home, I come back. I call her. I can't even remember like where I was. I was walking home from somewhere because I was in quarantine for 10 days after I got
Right.
back.
Right.
And I was walking home, and I had my phone call with her, and I could just tell that I love this woman. Like she
Oh,
just,
awesome.
I don't know. You just get those vibes from people where you're just like, this is a good person. This is a person
Right.
who really cares about their players, and it's not faked, and she's not trying to sell this. She's obviously trying to sell the school, but like in a very genuine way that
Right.
I like her.
Right.
And she tried to, so we had the phone call and did whatever. I'm like, I like this school. And she's like, "Hey, I
Right.
want to get you connected with some of the girls that are here. I want to set up a Zoom call with you and 3 of my players. And I want you to hear from them about the school."
Right.
And so I'm like, "Okay, great." I go on the Zoom call and they're like, "So, is there anything like else like you want to hear before you commit?" I was like, "Honestly, I just need her to ask me if I want to commit. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm coming, y'all. Like, I'd like to just say yes." And so then the
Right.
phone call after the Zoom call, she's like, "So what do I need to get you to do there?" I was like, "Coach, I'm good. Like, just let me commit. Can I just say yes?"
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was it. Again, I had to walk on. There was some scholarship money, but obviously ETSU is a little cheaper.
Yeah.
And applied a full 9 yards and moved there in July, and then that was it. Played my 5th year. I probably could have applied for a 6th because of COVID. So you have 5 years to play 4 seasons. Doesn't matter how. But if you decide to change sports, you still have the 5th. So like if I played just indoor, I'd only have 4 years, and then COVID would have been my 5th year.
Right.
Because I played indoor first, so I had like the 4, and then my sophomore year I technically redshirted because I didn't play. So
Right.
and then these 2 didn't happen. These are my beach years. And then I could have gotten COVID if I applied for it, and you apply for it after you finish, basically.
Right. Right.
But then midway through season, coach was asking, I was like, "Honestly, this is good. I'm good. I think I can end it here. Like I'm happy. I don't want to like sour it with anything."
I've done my thing at this
I've
point.
done my thing. I think it would be good for me to kind of explore other things and be a normal person and a normal student rather than an athlete. So I kind of have that transition. And yeah, then I started doing other stuff, and here we are.
So let me back up a little bit. I'm curious, the JUCO experience.
Okay.
I'm curious if other people had similar success coming out of Long Beach City College.
That's a funny thing about junior college. You get a very big smorgasbord of people and goals. I had a teammate that had never played volleyball before in her entire life and decided to come play at Long Beach City College. I had a couple teammates that went to Long Beach State. I had one that went to UC Riverside. One went to Tarleton, which is in Texas.
Yep.
Well, now they're D1 for volleyball, but they were D2 at the time. Yeah, theirs I think were a lot more last minute than mine. And
do you think you put in more effort to getting your name out there than they did?
I think we just had a different timeline. Junior college, obviously the whole NLI stuff was not really a thing.
Right. It's a very different process.
I started super early because I was so afraid that I was behind the ball because I was
Mhm.
I was behind in
From high school, yeah.
But everybody else probably started in like their sophomore year. I
Right.
started extremely, extremely early. That most coaches legit thought that I was trying to leave for my sophomore year, and I was like, no, I'm just trying to be on top of it so the junior roll or sophomore year rolls around, like I'm good. Like
Right.
I don't need to worry about it. So it was a little bit different. Um,
So, so one of the things that we've seen just from Bowden's experience is that the second year recruiting process is way more aggressive from the coaches than the first year,
mhm.
and so uh, the focus for many players is 2 years and then 2 year scholarship. And so, do you feel like the I guess Southern Cal uh, junior colleges were an effective springboard for I guess the D1 beach or D1 indoor?
I think so, at least for me. Like I gave Misty a list of schools, and she was like, "Okay, I'll reach out to these coaches," and that was the end of it. Um, it I think it just depends on because a lot of with junior college, it depends. Sometimes people are like, okay, is she good or it and has bad grades, or does she suck and is smart?
Right.
Is
Right.
was
Yeah.
legit what Misty was asked when Anna was asking about me. So does she have bad grades? Was the first question out of Anna's mouth about me because she already saw her as
Right.
an athlete just because of other rules. But so for girls like me, I think it depends on the junior college you go to and their history and stuff like that. With if they've had other girls go to big colleges, because it's all about who you know and all of that stuff. So you kind of have to do your research and see, okay, where did these girls go after they left
Right.
college? I
Right.
think I didn't have to do that obviously because it's my trainer. You see an email that's
Yeah.
at the bottom of it, you're fangirling, like you
Yeah.
know. But I think that's just the research you have to put in to be like, okay, where do these people go afterwards?
Right. So she was an effective advocate for your whole path, essentially.
I mean,
And
I did most of the emailing personally because I was doing it so early. But when I put my coaches at the bottom, it's like, it's my trainer. Oh my gosh.
right.
And
Right.
Anna and Misty were good friends. Anna was Misty's coach once upon a time back in like
Right.
2000. So again, that helped.
Right.
The other coach, they were at a wedding together. It's just volleyball.
Right.
Volleyball, especially, is such a small community more than you think, and beach volleyball even more so. That
Right.
it's just who you know, basically.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up. I appreciate all your time. Did you have any other further comments that you think would be helpful and that we didn't cover, or you think we've covered everything?
If you want to go into NCAA stuff, we can do that another day.
Well, the compliance, I feel like that's that could be hours.
Yeah.
I can sum it up because I don't know all of the rules, but a good amount of them.
All right. Well, thank you, Josannah, so much for coming, and Gunnar and I appreciate it. It was a great amount of information and very helpful.
Sport that we are unfamiliar with.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much. It was a great episode 4 of Going D1 Real Recruiting Stories with Gunnar Grun and Joel Grun.
Thanks for watching.
Josannah Vazquez as the guest. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for watching.